Hello and welcome to Vision 2020, where Miss Morani, Ngigi and I dig into the issues that are affecting your life and try to bring clear, biblical, crisp perspective on the things that matter. We are enjoying your feedback. Thank you for getting in touch with us. And of course, to kick us off is the very clever, very advocate in training, Morani Ngigi.
Yeah.
What's going on today?
Thank you. Very clever.
Yes.
Yeah, yet to be proven, but sure, fine.
Well, it's been proven primary, secondary, tertiary, now Kenya School of Law. You're doing well.
Well, we bring you clear, crisp, and we seek to shed some light on conversations that affect you and I.
Yes.
And if there's a conversation that is causing a lot of confusion, largely due to lack of civic education and just downright ignorance, is the conversation around tax. And because this is a Christian program and we want to link everything to what the gospel expects from us,
yes,
we are going to attempt, or rather execute, the discussion on tax on today's show,
yes,
of Vision 2020. Let us talk about what the Bible expects from us when it comes to tax, because it's an advocate for tax. Jesus himself was an advocate for taxation. If he was around today, he would say, absolutely pass the tax bill, tax the people.
So interesting. The taxation is a complex topic, both historically, biblically theologically, and in itself the history of how we got to modern taxation,
right,
and then where we are as a country. So those are three different things that we need to discuss. So let's start with the biblical history of taxation. The Israelites, unless they were in captivity, the first time they faced taxation is when they chose to have a king over them. God told Samuel to tell them that when you are agitating for a king, they said, we want a king over us to rule over us the same way our neighbors have kings.
Right.
And one of the things that God told them the king would do is that he would tax them. Okay? That's the first instance of tax in Israel.
Right.
Now, why was tax necessary? Because when you have an administration to run, you've got chiefs, chieftains, you've got civil servants, you've got all these people to pay, and you need resources. Then also you need to do development, so you need to build infrastructure and things like that. Then you need to offer social amenities, hospitals, police stations, etc. And then you need to keep the country safe, which is now the military. So that's the predominant reason why the kings of old would tax. Now, please remember that the Israelite was free from taxation before a ruler came.
Right.
Okay? This is important because we'll get back to it later. Now, in the history of taxation is throughout the kings, from Saul to David to Solomon, they taxed. Solomon's son, before the division of Israel, and this is now a key discussion point. When Solomon died, his son taking over was asked by the nation of Israel, about 12 tribes. They asked him, will you reduce the burden of tax your father had on us? And the Bible goes on to recount that he listened to the young men who told him that he should tax them more, that his little finger would be more heavy than his father's hand. The old men told him, if you lessen the burden of the people today, they will serve you forever.
The wiser older men.
The wiser older men. So he listened to the young men. And he told the people of Israel, I am today going to tax you and increase the burden more heavily than my father had done. That is the reason why the kingdom of Israel split. 10 tribes to form Israel and 2 tribes to form Judah. Okay? So the issue of the balance between too much tax and the cry of the people is not new.
Wow.
It's not new. The balance, even biblically, between how much you tax your people and how much you need to give them in service is a delicate political balance for any leader.
Right.
Now, not leaving the Bible, Jesus is asked a question, the scripture you're referring to,
Right.
asking, is it right to pay taxes to Caesar? Now, when we read this, we read it and think that the people were simply asking, is it right to pay taxes to the government? That's not what they were asking.
Okay.
Caesar was an occupying force. Caesar was a Roman dictator. So they were asking, since we are Jews, is it okay to pay taxes to this foreigner who we want to kick out? And remember, for the Jews at the time, they were waiting for the Messiah. Now, for us Christians, the Messiah is a religious figure who came to save us from sin and death.
Yeah.
For the Jew, the Messiah was someone who was coming to save them from political enemies. You get?
Yeah.
So they were asking him, as a political leader,
Right.
should we continue to pay taxes to Julius Caesar? Jesus' reaction was a spiritual one. It was not a taxation one. Let me explain. When he took the coin, he said, whose image is on the coin? Then they said, Caesar's. Then he said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar,
Right.
and give to God what belongs to God. In that instance, he was instituting 2 systems on earth that ran concurrently.
Right.
The image of the thing determines the tax to whom you pay. If the currency you use is Kenya shillings,
Right.
then pay the Kenyan government its taxes. If the image you use is the image of God, then pay God his taxes. You get?
Yeah.
Meaning that if you're participant in the economy of a nation, then you need to pay its taxes. But that nation cannot then remove its obligation to tax you in a manner that you feel is fair
Right.
and commiserate to the services you receive.
Right. And you've said, and it always blows my mind when I realize that indeed nothing is new under the sun, and
Yes.
that the issues that we are dealing with now have been dealt with time and time again.
Yes.
You've talked about the splitting, and someone might be nervous. Is that where we are headed? Because we are stuck in the very big word,
Yes.
look out, quagmire.
Yes.
And that is this discussion on taxation. What are the solutions that are offered? What happened in those times, and what can we implement in our system now that we are in this sort of push and pull?
So let's talk about the history of taxation. History, and let me now talk specifically about European history, is littered with stories of revolt around taxation and the quality of service that people receive. If you look at the Leninist revolution in Russia, it was about a people who felt the ruling class, the Tsars, were taking too much and giving the people too little. If you remember the Arab Spring, which America hijacked to make political, The man who burnt himself, do you remember the story? Let me tell you the story.
Remind us the story.
This man was a vendor, and he had a little cat. And doing his business, the local authority would come and harass him about licenses. And he got so frustrated about how these people were frustrating him, frustrating his business, overtaxing his business.
Right.
But he went in front of that building, lit himself on fire. And that's how the Arab Spring started. At the same time, you need to remember the French Revolution. The famous anecdotal saying, which is not true, but really epitomizes the time, that the French were hungry. They couldn't afford bread. They couldn't afford to balance between their wages and the needs they had in terms of feeding themselves and their families.
Very familiar to us now.
Yes. And Marie Antoinette, who was their queen, is quoted as saying, it's not true, she did not say this. She said, if they can't afford bread, let them eat cake. This statement is said to show how the aristocrats, the ruling class, were deaf and blind to the plight of the people.
Right.
And that's how the French Revolution happened. This is why there are kings all over Europe, in the Netherlands, for example, in the UK, for example, but there's no king in France, because that's when the king was dethroned. And he was dethroned because of the lack of sensitivity to the needs of the people. So, and history is littered with such revolutions all over the world, because taxation must be commensurate to services. So for example, Kenya is not overtaxed. Compared to places in the Schengen area in Europe, where people pay 54% income tax. So imagine if your salary is 100 Gs, 54K is taken as tax.
Yeah.
But those countries don't face revolt because education is free, healthcare is free. When you are pregnant, the government pays for you to be pregnant, pays for your maternity. University education is free. You know, so you're like, I'm paying 54%, but so there's always that balance between the services being offered by government and how much you're taxing. Okay? That's always the pain. So for example, if you are told today, pay 40% tax, and then you have the best transport system, and then education is free, and then you've got affordable housing, and then university is free.
And services are streamlined.
Yes, and then healthcare is free. You'll be like, that's a lot of stress off my back, I'll pay my 40%.
Sure.
So you ask, the reason I've given all these stories to answer the question, that is there a solution? The answer is yes, there is. The solution is, can the government of Kenya balance between the services it's giving its people and the amount of tax it's charging? Because the tradition has been in Kenya for a while is taxes go up and services remain the same.
Same, right.
That's the bigger issue. The second issue is how Kenyans are being addressed. Any wise leader should know that taxation is a gentle and sensitive topic. You can't be rude about it.
Right.
You can't be brazen about it. You've got to use a term we used to say when you were young. You have to katia people about it. You have to tune us. That's an even older saying.
Really?
Yes, you've got to vibe us.
Oh, right.
You've got to woo us to want to buy into
what you're selling,
paying
yes.
extra taxes. So those are the two solutions. Because there are places in this country where people pay tax, but there's no hospital, there are no schools, there's no running water, there's no electricity. Taxes must follow services.
So civic education. How do we approach that conversation? Because it's a difficult conversation. We failed terribly with the COVID. We failed terribly with even implementation or rolling out of plans that state has. How do we implement the conversation around civic plans to vibe us or tune us, as you have said?
You see, there is an expectation in our constitution that is called public participation. That expectation, though well-intentioned, was misguided in its practicality.
Right.
Many people, if you give them the tax bill, they don't understand it. Okay?
Yeah.
Now, you are a lawyer. You know, if you give a layman the penal code, they don't get it.
Yeah.
We have talked about civic education for many years. Human beings don't react academically. They react emotionally.
Right.
Okay? It is true. Kenyans need information. What do their taxes do? Where do they go? And things like that. But the intricacies of it can be a bit complex. Let's take debt as an example. There's debt in local currency. There's debt in international currency. There's consensual debt. There's commercial debt. There is long-term debt. There's short-term debt, and all of these instruments of debt are government ways of raising revenue. So hold on. Why do governments go to debt instead of taxation? The reason why governments borrow is because the amount of money needed versus your capacity to tax people now does not match.
Right.
Your needs are here, the tax capacity of people is here. So what do? You borrow so that when you tax people, they will still pay this difference, but they'll pay it over 25 years, they'll pay it over 30 years, they'll pay it sometimes up to 50 years, right? So borrowing is a way of dealing with tax. It's number one. But number two, and I don't know whether I should say this, in fiat economies, and Kenya is one, the government is the one that prints currency.
What's a fiat economy?
That's why okay, let me. In a fiat economy, basically, the government prints cash, money, and releases it to the market.
Right.
That's the most basic way I can explain it. Now, you must wonder that if you're a civil servant, you work for the government. So why does the thing that prints money pay you and then charge you tax. I am the one who pays you, okay? I pay you, then I charge you tax, and I'm still the printer of money. Why not just pay civil servants without charging them tax?
Right.
Right? The reason why taxes exist is also to create demand for your currency. And the reason why the government can't just print money is because it will create an inflation. That means things will become expensive because you've got too much money coming in. Now, I'm just giving an example of the complexity of
the tax conversation.
Yes.
Yeah.
It is not a simple thing. Now, beyond that, you've got to, so that's just understanding taxes, a fiat economy, the kind of borrowing and things like that. Then we must understand the impact of taxation on an economy. Okay? Because there are two things that people need to understand. But number one, the prices of goods and commodities have been going up in Kenya. So we are in an inflationary situation. So there is inflation. If you increase tax, the inflation will increase. Obviously, because if we take petrol for an example, which is now at 180, if you add an 8% tax, 8% of 180 is nearly 17, 15 shillings. So from 180 to 195, right? That means the cost of transport will go up, cost of production will go up, cost will go up. As these costs go up, the cost of living is going to increase. But remember, you are taxing people's incomes, both in business and in salaries. That means that the cost of living has gone up, but the ability to spend has gone down. Meaning that people will not be able to afford as many goods and services in just 2 months, which means that your ambition to raise more taxes might not actually work because you will create a situation where people want to spend less. Now, all of this is economics, it is complex and stuff.
Right.
Some people are already like, huh? What are you talking about? Now, let me give you the thing that should be called civic education. Governments need to share in clear, crisp Vision 2020 style their plans, their ambitions. Because if you tell someone, I'm taxing you this much, but we will be a first world country.
In no time.
In no time. They get it. Tell your grandma you're paying extra for fuel, but there'll be a state-of-the-art road, there'll be water in your kitchen, you'll go to the hospital, it is free.
Right.
Kenyans will buy that. What needs to happen is not an explanation of the intricacies of macro and microeconomics. No. What a good leader does is sell a vision and then carries his people along for that vision. It says, write down the vision and make it clear, so that he who runs will be able to run with it. Now, leaders are the vision bearers. Guess who runs? It's you and I.
Yeah.
We are the ones who every day are running up and down. If that vision is not clear, then we fight, because it feels like you're giving us a burden that is not easy to carry.
Right.
So the civic education needs to move from explaining macro and microeconomics to explaining where we're going.
Right.
And that's what has been lacking in this debate, that we don't know where we are going.
Right, and as we wrap up, because we are running out of time.
Oh, yeah? Okay.
Yeah. I think you've talked a lot about, public participation, you've talked about the king consulting the young men and the elder men. This conversation has been very, you need to do this. What do we need to do? What do we, the citizens of this country, need to do to make the situation better? Because inevitably we are the ones who will be affected by the same.
Okay, so there's only two things to be done when you are facing higher taxes. One, increase your income. Side hustles, businesses, getting promotions, very important. Number two is getting employment outside of Kenya. Now, we're in the internet age. You don't need to leave Kenya. You can be employed by international organization, be paid in dollars.
They know, they're working, they're writing online, they're writing exams for people in the US.
Yeah, so that is number two. But number three, most important thing you can do if you're a business person, get a tax consultant. Get an accountant that understands what tax you need to pay, when you need to pay it, how much of it you need to pay, what you qualify for, what you don't qualify for, because the survival of your business is going to be based on how smart you are. So if I was to wrap it up, Jesus said, be as gentle as a dove and as cunning as a serpent. When you're dealing with taxes, the cunning as a serpent part becomes very real, very fast.
Okay.
That's our show?
That's our show.
We are done. Thank you for joining us. I know that was a sensitive topic. Taxes, I hope you now understand them. You know what you need to do. And I hope those of you who have influence can speak to the people who need to listen, and let us all listen to each other and have better wisdom on how to deal with this matter. See you guys next week.